Good morning, fellow Rotarians and guests. Thank you for being here this morning. It's that season of the year. The sky is getting a little bit bright as we come together and join. The buds are getting ready to burst, or some of them are actually bursting. The daffodils are up, so it's a great time of the year. Chris Barker, some guests to introduce, and thank you for being here.
Good morning, Rotarians and guests. It's so nice to have a full house. Welcome back, Rotarians that have been snowbirds for the past 2, 3, 4 months. It's great to see y'all again. We have a few guests in addition to the speakers that are with us today, and if they could please stand up so we can give them a warm Rotary welcome. First, we have Hoyt Wilhelm joining us from Hudson United Methodist Church, guest of Dave Basil. Thanks for joining us. And we have Rob McCarty. He's here with Judge Teodosio, and he's from the Summit County Juvenile Court Division. Thank you for joining us. And helping us again on AV from Hudson Service Learning class is Ariana Bankovich. Thank you for helping us again. Thank you.
I'm just going to throw in, if any of you know Dick McCarty and his 8 kids who live in Hudson, that's Rob's brother.
Ah. And just to echo Chris, welcome back to Ed Sogan and Jim Hackney, and I saw Phil Warburton. Welcome back, gentlemen. Happy to have you home. And a couple of items from the gala. First, Ron Strobel, a couple of updates on the auction.
First, Evan, could you give us an update on where we are on the value of gifts brought in so far?
Good morning, fellow Rotarians.
Good morning, Evan.
All right, thank you to everyone that's gotten on the ball early on. The total gifts that have come in so far, and again, our goal is $65,000 of fair market value. We're at just over 14,000. So we've got a pretty big gap to fill, and I know that you all are working hard in the community, contacting your donors. So keep up the good work. The top team right now is McDowell's Big Macs, and we've had a couple of big ticket items come in. My favorite is gotta be the Corvette for a month. I think that that's going to be a pretty cool item, and there's some folks out in the crowd and in our club that you can talk to about that. In addition to that, Dr. John White with Braces by White has gifted orthodontic treatment, comprehensive orthodontic treatment. That's either Invisalign or normal braces. So, you know, maybe you have some folks that you know that might be getting braces here soon, or maybe yourself. So keep up the great work. Thank you very much to Doug McDowell and his Big Macs for doing a great job so far, and we'll look forward to sharing a much higher update next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. Jim Ahern, quick update from the team captains.
Last night, I drove by Ron's house about midnight, and he was pacing. He had all these sheets, and he's looking, going up and down the sidewalk on Owen Brown Road. So I didn't stop because I was afraid to. That's right. That's right. I actually had a shovel, but I saw him, so I put the shovel back. I asked all the captains to get out to their teams, and I'll own this one for this week because it was probably not enough time to get back from everybody, and one captain is gone, and so I don't have an incomplete report. And rather than that, I'm just going to talk to you about the overall trend. The overall trend is that most people are making some contacts. Some people haven't started yet. So here's the issue, is that this is fairly easy to do with most people that have been part of it. When it gets tough is if it's in the last week or two and you find out somebody's on vacation or they got something big going on, and this just kind of adds to their pile when there's a short time limit. So the plea is just make contact so that they know. I have 12 contacts, and I can tell you out of the 12, I think 5 or 6 knew they got a letter. The others have been given for a few years, and they didn't even know they got the letter. So maybe it doesn't make their desk, or it's just another in the pile that goes in the round file pretty quickly. So they don't even know. So they're not waiting for you to pick up something. It's not even on their top of mind for the most part. So here's the issue. Make a contact. I'd say right now we have about half of our donors that have been contacted based on the read so far. So some have contacted everybody, and some have yet to start. So I'm going to send out another plea to the captains to keep reminding folks to, make a contact, make sure you get to the right person, and find out when you can pick up the gift. So our captains will be in contact again next week, and hopefully we'll get a much higher percentage.
Thank you, Jim. And like I've said every year that I've been the chairman of this, the easiest time to make sure that you get a gift is the first week after those letters have gone out. As Jim said, it's now been 2.5 weeks, and a lot of the letters have been set aside and misplaced. So get out and see these people face to face, and it's very easy. A lot of them are just waiting for somebody to show up and ask them. I think that's it. Like Jim said, you get out there and beat the pavement. And if you ever see me up at midnight, that would be a miracle.
Thanks, Ron. And now to introduce the topic of one of our primary beneficiaries this year, Gail Royster.
Good morning, Rotarians. And thank you, President Dave. It is indeed my pleasure to introduce the 2 women who are the driving force behind a new program that is being launched actually next week. And we are supporting it. We are sponsoring the program called What Every Senior Needs to Know Before Entering College. And these 2 women are head of Hudson Community First, and as I said, it's a new program, And we have just jumped on board with it because we so believe in what they are doing. So that should help inspire you to get out there and keep soliciting for donations. The deadline, by the way, for gifts, Evan reminded me, is April 26th. The deadline for your donor gifts, April 26th. So let me please introduce Cheryl Rauch and Laura Gasparo.
I want to give it a try. Good morning, Rotarians. Well, I'm Laura, and this is Cheryl. We're glad to be here this morning to tell you about this program. We're so thrilled that really Rotary is the catalyst. Your grant is the catalyst behind all of these seniors benefiting from this program. Community First is a nonprofit in Hudson that promotes positive youth development. Most of our programs focus on leadership building, self-esteem building, and I'm sure you recognize our No One Starts with Heroin program, which is a big program that we do about educating parents and the community and children about drugs. So this is really part of our No One Starts with Heroin program. It's called Uncharted Waters, and what seniors need to know, and it's going to happen next week. So I guess...
Well, really quickly, just to let you know that the way we came up with this idea is the way we come up with a lot of our different programming is we hear from people in the community. We have a 50-person advisory board and a 50-person volunteer board, and we always are asking them, what do you think we need in our community? What's missing for kids? What do we need to do? And we've, over the last couple of years, gotten a lot of feedback about the fact that kids are leaving the Hudson bubble and leaving their homes and going to college, and they're not prepared, and they're facing some very scary issues that we just want to help prepare them a little more for. And we were so excited that you all are helping with this. The Hudson City School District and the principal of the high school and Kelly Kemp, the director of pupil services, have jumped on board with us and given us an entire day for this program. So we're very excited. It's a mandatory program. Every senior in Hudson High School will be involved in this. So we're very excited.
So this is what the day is going to look like. It's divided into 5 different topic areas: wellness, relationships, sexual assault, date rape, safety on campus, now that you're 18, what you need to know, and then it will end with a senior meeting and a class picture. So all of the kids will be there all day and end up at their senior meeting for all of their information about graduation. So that will ensure that we won't lose anybody during the day. The day is in 4 different rotating sessions, so there are approximately 408 students in the senior class right now. It'll be divided by 100 students at a time, so each student will circulate through the 4 different sessions.
Okay, the program, which we kind of talked about before, it will examine the challenges young people face when they leave high school and enter their college years. The goal is to better prepare students for the next chapter in their lives with strategies to help them stay safe and healthy. Some of the students, we did a lot of research before we asked for this grant. Some of the challenges that face students in college, the top 3 that are reported are anxiety. It's the top presenting concern among college students, depression, and relationship problems. So we wanted to make sure that we focused and covered each of those ideas. We wanted to, this wasn't something that college kids indicate, but we knew it was an issue on campuses. We wanted to help them avoid encounters of sexual assault and date rape, and this is for girls and boys. You know, they both need to know, what's involved in that. Drug and alcohol issues on campuses, including binge drinking and overdoses. We all have been hearing horror stories, and it's going on this year. I have a son at Miami, and a freshman passed away this this winter. So it's just very scary, the things that are happening there. The fact that responsibilities and consequences change when you reach 18 and reach adulthood, and being aware of your surroundings, being an empowered bystander, sticking together and understanding what to look out for will help support the student safety on campus.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to talk about
Sure.
the presenters?
So for those 4 sessions, the Hudson City Schools has worked very hard to really determine who the right speaker should be for each of the sessions. And the first session on relationships, sexual assault, and date rape will be presented by the Summit County Battered Women's Shelter. And we asked the schools to give us what the discussion topics would be in order for you to understand a little bit what they would be focusing on. So they will be looking at the different statistics about being empowered bystanders, the rape culture, both for boys and girls, and victim blaming, and the different support services on campus if you are in trouble and you need help. They have asked that one counselor and one administrator be in, particularly in this session, because of the subject matter. And I don't think we said this, but a letter went home to all the parents of the kids participating, and they have an opt-out option in case the parents don't want them to be a part of any one of these sessions or even the program as a whole. We don't know what the statistics are, but we do think that most parents would want their children to get this information before entering college.
And we're talking about college, but a lot of this information is good for kids that might not go to college or might go to college and then leave college. It's not just college students. We just have a high percentage that do go to college, so we keep referring to the college, but it's really as they leave the school and home bubble.
The next presenter is Todd Wickerham, and he's from the FBI Cleveland Division. He will talk about safety on campus, and we also, as part of this safety section, will provide fire safety information for kids in the college dorm and in off-campus housing in those old apartments sometimes that they stay in. So that will be part of the safety section too. But Todd will talk about the different dangers and preventative strategies to keep the students safe, and to have you really have your instincts tell you this isn't a safe situation, or it's at night and you're by yourself, and to be in the right defensive mindset to know what to do in case you're confronted with a situation. Also, he'll talk about the dangers of overdosing and binge drinking during this session, which we think is, as Cheryl said, a really important section of being safe on campus.
And then we're going to have Judge Lisa Coates and a panel of that she's going to bring with her to discuss really when you turn 18, what you need to know about your new responsibilities. So they'll cover emancipation, credit, employment identity theft, driving, insurance. You know, as you can see, just the things that you need to know once you're 18. And final, we'll have Dr. Jason Miller, and he's the Director of Counseling and Human Development at Kent State University. And this is really to talk about the wellness and the anxiety and how to stay mentally prepared in college with stress, anxiety, decision-making, healthy boundaries, resilience, and overall well-being. So we're very excited about the people that we have that are presenting. Do you want to go ahead?
And then at the end of each school year, all seniors do a exit survey. So questions are going to be added to that exit survey about this particular program so that we can give feedback as to how to improve the program as we go forward, and suggestions maybe that they wanted to see a subject that wasn't covered during the program. So we're hoping that that exit survey will help us lead into the future and make the program bigger and better every year. At the end of the day, We will have a senior meeting that'll be conducted by the principal, and they will take their senior class photo, and then the students that were involved in some discussion said, well, let's have a raffle and some giveaways. So we're getting together some raffle prizes, like fans for your dorm and clocks for your dorm and different dorm, items that kids have to take off to college. So everybody's really excited about this program. Okay, so with the gala money, this is what will be provided to every student in addition to the speakers coming. They will all get a box lunch from Chipotle. We're going to provide water bottles all day. They'll get a mid-morning snack to break up their day a little bit. In addition, as I said, the raffle items. And then they will also have a takeaway bag. And then if any of you have anything to add to the bag, we'd be glad to add it to the bag. But they're going to get fire safety information. We've purchased a all-in-one light whistle compass device that every student will receive. Coupons from area retailers like Target and Bed Bath & Beyond. They've given us things to put inside the bag so that they can go and purchase college-related items. Judge Coates has provided a resource list that she would like in the bag, and they will get a suicide prevention lifeline wallet card in case they're ever in trouble. It's, a hotline that they'd be able to call to get some help immediately. We know that we never can do programs without everybody working with us in our community. Community First is really about partnering, and this partnership between Rotary and the Hudson Schools and Community First and really your Rotary Gala really is making this possible. And it makes it possible for 408 students who will benefit from this program, and we think that the program is a great program that could be an ongoing program each year. And so we thank you, and we thank all the people that are listed there who helped us to put the program together. We think it's going to be something that will represent not only Community First, but the Rotary Club of Hudson very well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Cheryl, for all of your hard and continuing work for the young people of Hudson. I know it's a labor of love for you, and we are honored to support your effort in this regard. And a thank you to all of the members of this Rotary Club for your efforts this year for the gala to help sponsor this program. It is very worthwhile, very important. Next, the introduction of today's speaker by Roseanne Drake. Roseanne?
Good morning, Rotarians. Good morning. Good morning. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Judge Linda Teodosio. Judge Teodosio was elected to the Summit County Juvenile Court Bench in 2003. She has received local, statewide, and national recognition for her innovative programming and progressive approach to juvenile dispositions and rehabilitation. Among the unique programs she has introduced at the Summit County Juvenile Court are Restore Court, a program that addresses youth who become court involved but have been identified as victims of human trafficking. The Crossroads program, a specialized docket designed for youth with co-occurring mental illness and/or substance dependence. The Family Resource Center, which provides case management which links youth and families to support services in the community. The Family Reunification through Recovery Court, which assists families that have lost custody of their children due to chemical dependency, and New Paths Probation for youth with developmental delays. The court actively participates in the Casey Foundation's Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative and the crossover youth practice model developed by Georgetown University. The common thread woven through the development and implementation of these programs is Judge Teodosio's penchant for bringing community collaborators to the table to help shape and implement programs that focus on the particular strengths and needs of children and families through the use of evidence-based and promising practices. Judge Teodosio's work on the juvenile court bench has been extensively recognized. In September 2016, she received the Thomas Moyer Award for Judicial Excellence from the Ohio State Bar Association. In 2012, Judge Teodosio received the prestigious award for innovation from the Margaret Clark Morgan Foundation, and those are just two of the many awards that Judge Teodosio has received. She is married to General Division Common Pleas Judge Thomas Teodosio. Their son Christopher is a practicing attorney who makes his home in Summit County with his wife Catherine and daughter Charlotte. They remember their late daughter through the Andrea Rose Teodosio Foundation. Let's give Judge Teodosio a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Roseanne, for inviting me to be here this morning. It's certainly a pleasure to address you, and hopefully it will stay pleasurable if I can figure out what's going on with the mic. A point of correction, my husband is now on the 9th District Court of Appeals, and I would have misery at home if I didn't make that correction, so I'm going to do that. Thank you. Do I need to pull this down or just leave it there? Okay, thank you. And I also want to mention that, we have a large group that works at the court. There's about 200 employees that are at the court, including Rob McCarty, one of my magistrates that does a fine job with working with children and families in the community. And we do a lot of work. We try very hard to do what's best for kids, and it really is a team effort. And I'm really thrilled to be able to be surrounded by so many talented and dedicated people. I wanted to salute the work that you're doing with the high school students. That sounds like an amazing thing, and I'm sure that it will make a huge difference for them as they move forward. Today I'm here to talk about something that we don't like to think about existing in our community, but unfortunately is there, and that is the issue of human trafficking. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what human trafficking is. And I'm going to start off by talking about what human trafficking is not. I think sometimes when we think about human trafficking, we have these visions of young women that were removed from their home in Eastern Europe and promised fame and fortune in the United States, were brought here under false pretenses, locked in a house, and forced to do things that they do not want to do. Well, I'm sure those things certainly exist, and that would certainly be a form of human trafficking. That is not the most common form of human trafficking that we see, and it is certainly not the only way that young people are trafficked. Unfortunately, in our county, there's some extensive human trafficking going on among young men and women. So much so that we felt it necessary in our county to start a specialized docket, a specialized probation and case management to work with these young men and women. You'll have to forgive me if I slip back into saying girls, because the majority of our docket are young women, and I don't think that's because this is singular as to young women. I think the fact of the matter is it's a lot easier to identify the young women than it is the young men. It's a lot easier for a young woman, I think, sometimes to come forward and disclose some of the things that have happened to her. With the young men, sometimes there's a bit more shame and resistance to making that information known. We have tried to do a lot of work around identifying our boys that are involved with trafficking, but it's going to take a lot more work and a lot more expertise for us to be able to do the best job possible on that. So Ohio has a statute that defines what human trafficking is. It's knowing or knowingly attempting to recruit, lure, entice, isolate, harbor, transport, provide, obtain, or maintain another person, knowing that the person will be subjected to involuntary servitude or be compelled to engage in sexual activity or sexually oriented performances. So in Ohio, human trafficking can take place in one of two ways. It can be a person that is being utilized for profit, for sexual activity or sexual performances, or it can be labor trafficking. So to take a young person and require, or any person, this doesn't have to be juveniles, I always think of the young people because that's what I work with, but to take a person and require that they work extensive hours for little or no pay is also a form of trafficking, and both are very important to know about. For sex trafficking, it's important to know that there isn't, many times you think about compulsion. With sex trafficking, compulsion is not necessary. If the individual is under the age of 16 years old and they are involved somehow in sexual activity for hire, there is no need to show compulsion. In Summit County, we've seen girls as young as 11 involved in this kind of activities. They are not even old enough to consent to sexual activity, let alone to be engaged in all of this. So, what I really want to come out from this is that, there are no teenage prostitutes. These young men and women do not have the choice to make up their mind on some of these things. They are too young to knowingly consent in many cases to even engaging in sexual activity. If a child is 16 or 17 years old and they are being sexually exploited for profit, there is a need to show compulsion unless the trafficker is the parent of that child, and believe it or not, we have seen some of that in our county. Or number two, if the person who is trafficking that individual is someone who stands in loco parentis, someone that they're living with, a guardian, is it a coach, a teacher, someone that has a position of authority and care over that child. If that is the person that is trafficking the individual, there is not a need under Ohio law to show compulsion. Something of value. To be a victim of human trafficking, that something of value does not necessarily have to involve pay for sex. Okay, so I want you to, that's certainly an example of what it can be, but it doesn't necessarily need to be pay for sex. Let me explain what I mean by that. Let's say that you've got a 16-year-old girl, she's a runaway, she's living on the streets, and someone, either a man or a woman, approaches her and says, "You come live with me, I'll take care of you. The only thing that you need to do is engage in sexual activity with me." So, you often hear that referred to as survival sex. A kid has nowhere to live, no roof over their head, no food to eat. Someone agrees to take them in, and that is considered sexual exploitation of that young child. Okay. Something of value can be something very minimal. Another thing that you hear about in addition to survival sex or providing sexual gratification to the other person in exchange for a roof over your head is for some of our young women that become involved with drugs and become addicted to heroin. The exchange of drugs for sex is also a form of trafficking because they are giving them something of value. But it can be something very de minimis. It can be, a piece of jewelry, it could be clothing, anything that is something of value. Sexual trafficking can include prostitution, stripping, interfamiliar familiar pimping. I was at a conference in Washington on domestic sex trafficking, and we had spent a lot of time talking about girls, and that's why I always say up front that I don't mean to limit this to just girls, even though sometimes it slips out that way. One of the judges that was there at this conference, it was a conference for judges, stood up and said, "I'm tired of hearing just about the girls." He said, "I was a victim of human trafficking my entire life." He said, "My father was a prominent physician. He liked little boys. He shared me. He used me. I was in pictures." He said, "Every time they took my picture," he said, "believe it or not, I looked into the camera and hugged my teddy bear because I kept hoping that someone would see my picture and realize that I was a victim and come save me," but it never happened. So I think sometimes, the circumstances that exist for some of these kids is a nightmare because they're not seen. But it can unfortunately include situations where the person that you would expect would be their greatest protector is the individual that is sharing them or doing other things. And it can also involve internet-based exploitation. Many of our young women that are involved with our docket tell us that they were pimped out through a site that's called Backpage, where they can post pictures of individuals that are available for sale. And what happens is somebody will take their picture, post their picture up there, and they'll make internet calls, meet them at a local hotel, their pimp will drop them off, pick them up when they're done. And so that is something that, you know, the internet's good for a lot of things, but unfortunately it's also created some situations where people with bad intent are taking advantage of it. And it can also include, as I indicated, survival sex. For labor trafficking, I'm just going to touch on this for a moment. We haven't seen a lot of that in the Summit County Juvenile Court. And I don't know if it's because these individuals are not being picked up on offenses, which is necessary before they come to our attention. I talked to many of the officers, and they don't see a lot of that going on, but certainly I worry about it in some of our immigrant communities where maybe their culture is different, where they expect kids to work at a younger age, and I worry about them being exploited by someone who is willing to take advantage of them. But with labor trafficking, there must be a showing of compulsion. The compulsion may include, and this is the truth for sex trafficking too, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm forcing you at gunpoint. I'm forcing you by some kind of restraint or putting you behind locked doors. Compulsion may include force, threats, or lies. If you don't do this for me, I know where you live, I know your little brother's name, I'm going to go and kill your little brother. And you know, these children believe it because many times they are victimized by their trafficker. They are beaten. I had one young woman who was beaten, locked in the basement for days on end. Her pimp put out cigarettes on her body. She's severely scarred from some of the most significant beatings that she's taken, beaten to the point of unconsciousness. So when these individuals tell them, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to kill your family, I'm going to, you know, kill your brother, I'm going to do terrible things, they believe them because they've experienced a great deal of violence at the hands of their traffickers. Recruitment often occurs by false pretenses or circumstances. Some examples where labor trafficking is probably the most common would be with traveling sales crews, where someone would take kids from place to sell things, hair braiding, factory work, farm work, gang activity, and forced criminal acts. To give you an example of labor trafficking that I did see in the court, and it came on through a case through child welfare. We had a case where a father had a group of 5 children in his home. I think 4 were his, 1 was his partner's child from a prior relationship. And what he would do is he would take these children and go to Sam's Club or Costco and buy one of the big boxes with a lot of candy on it, drop them off at different places, and they had to act as though they were raising money for a school project or something of that sort. They had to sell all the candy, and then they had to give the money to him, and he used it for drugs. If the kids refused to sell the candy, they would be taken down to the basement, stripped naked, and beaten with a belt. If they ate any of the candy, it would be the same consequence. And the one young woman who testified at her trial told me that one day somebody said, here, let me give you some money, but I don't want any of the candy. You just use it for your fundraising efforts. And she was practically in tears saying, you know, please take the candy because I'm not allowed to leave till the candy box is empty. So, you know, it's really unfortunate, but those are some of the examples. That's an example of labor trafficking that happened right here in our county. So what are some red flags for human sex trafficking? As I indicated, it does happen here. I think probably 75% of the zip codes in Summit County, we have seen a young woman who's been a victim of human trafficking, that have been involved in selling themselves on Backpage, or has been involved in exchanging sex for other goods with a person. And when you talk about coercion and how does this happen, I think it's important to think of the situation that these kids are in. Typically, the young women that we see that are involved in human trafficking, and again, we've had one young man, they are usually victims of sexual abuse at some point in time in their life or another. So they have a significant trauma history. Most of them, it was when they were very young. Some of our young women, the trauma that they sustained as youngsters is so severe that they can't even talk about it. They can't even bring themselves to identify the trauma. Many times it's at the hands of a boyfriend of their mother who was unaware that this was going on, but it could be sexual abuse by anyone. That is usually the common factor that we see among these young people. Many of them have very low self-esteem. They are targeted by traffickers who have a way of identifying these girls with low self-esteem, and it starts off very innocently. The trafficker will approach the young woman at a mall, at a school, and they'll say, boy, you're really a beautiful girl. If the girl looks at him and says, oh, get lost, buddy, leave me alone, or walks away and has the confidence to do that, the trafficker will just move on to the next one. But if they find someone who giggles and smiles and is obviously very taken with the fact that this person thinks that they're beautiful, they'll continue to prey on that child. They go through a grooming period where they tell the child, you're beautiful, I love you, nobody loves you like I do, nobody will take care of you the way I do. They shower them with all kinds of gifts, buy them fancy clothes, purses, take them to get their hair done, just really make them feel like a princess without asking for anything in return. Gradually, they work with these kids to the point where they become engaged in sexual activity with the child, making them believe that they are really in love with them. Usually what happens at that point in time, they start to tell the girl, we could really use some money. If we can earn some money, it can be just you and me. We're a little bit short now. I've spent all this money to make you happy. I need you to do something with me. I need you to go and have intercourse with this person so that we can earn some money. So at that point in time, the girl is so on the hook, so in love, so separated from everybody else, believing that this is the only person that really loves her, that she will do anything for her trafficker. And, it's really sad to say, but there are actually books out there that explain to someone step by step how to build your group of girls to work with you. As the girls become involved with this person, the one situation that we see a lot in our court, and, unfortunately, is girls recruiting other girls on behalf of their trafficker. So it is quite a network. There really is a science to it, unfortunately, and they are very good at discovering girls who are easy prey. So what are some red flags that you might look for? Now, that's not to say if you see one of these things that these people are automatically victims of human trafficking. There's a lot more to it than that. But these are some of the things that we commonly see with trafficking victims. A child having a significantly older boyfriend or friend in general. And I have a 13-year-old girl telling me her boyfriend is 22, the bells and whistles go off that something's not quite right there. And, you would think the parents would say, boy, I'm not going to allow you to see this person. Sometimes these guys, and it could be a woman too, do a great job of buying nice things for the parent too, so that the parent thinks they're really wonderful people. Another red flag is signs of trauma, either physical, mental, or emotional trauma that the child is exhibiting. Chronic absences from school or attempts to run away. A lot of our kids get dropped off at school, they leave, they meet their trafficker, or they aren't going to school at all. Multiple delinquency charges, many times theft, looking for the basic necessities. Some of our victims are homeless, and that's how they get pulled into some of these circles. They may have tattoos that look like brands or read like the names of unknown men or other persons. The pimps are really good at branding. They'll put their name on the individual somewhere just to reinforce to that girl that I own you. So they may put their name or some other identifying mark on the child to indicate that they belong to that particular pimp. Substance use, very common, and sometimes I don't know which came first, whether they got involved in this kind of activity because they were drug addicted and the trafficker is providing them with the drugs that they need, or if the trauma of being involved in this kind of activity is so great that they use the drugs to kind of numb themselves a little bit. But it's very common to see drug abuse. I had a girl picked up at her home while her mother's screaming for her to come back into the house. She was taken to a house in Cleveland, given a lot of drugs. She was there for 3 days. She says, I don't remember very much of it, but after they were done with me, they put me out on the street and I had to find my way back to Akron. So, it does happen that substance abuse can be a huge factor with that. A child appears overly submissive, afraid, or nervous. Appears malnourished. May be afraid to socialize or claim that they're not allowed to socialize. May seem scripted or pre-rehearsed conversations. In other words, they've been told if somebody asks you this is your answer. And inappropriate dress based on the weather or conditions. They may appear to be dressed inappropriately. A sudden change in attention to personal hygiene, hyperarousals or symptoms of anger, panic, phobia, irritability, hyperactivity, frequent crying, temper tantrums, regressive behavior, and or clinging behavior. So something beyond what you would expect to see with a normal teenager. Symptoms of daydreaming, inability to bond with others, inattention, forgetfulness, and or shyness. So exactly what is the problem? You know, if we know that this is going on, you know, why aren't these girls coming forward? Why aren't we doing something about it? While we have the laws necessary to prosecute traffickers and protect victims, we can often not utilize them because we can't locate the victims. These victims do not see themselves as victims. We do not refer to their pimps as pimps. We don't refer to them as victims in the courtroom. They believe that this is their boyfriend. They are in love with this person, and so they don't see that they are being victimized at all. So they're not likely to come forward and say, help me, help me. Okay, that would be a really rare situation. They don't want to be helped. They want to stay with their trafficker. We will put them in a safe environment, and they will run away from that and run right back to their trafficker. And that happens, you know, numerous times before we can get them on the right track. Many victims are seen as criminals and charged with prostitution or solicitation. Okay, I'll tell you what happens. The pimp tells them, those people don't care anything about you. What they're going to do is they're going to arrest you, charge you with a crime, and throw you in jail. So why do you want to go to them? And what do? When we find them, we arrest them, we charge them with prostitution, and we put them in detention. And that's always a struggle for the court because we want to keep them safe. We don't want them to run away. We don't want to put them in harm's way. But by the same token, if we put them in our detention center, many times we're re-traumatizing them. And we just confirm what their pimp has told them. You know, the other thing that we see very commonly is that they'll arrest the young girl, you know, 14, 15, 16 years old, charge her with prostitution, bring her down to my detention center, but they'll tell the John, the one that's purchasing the sex, go on home and don't do that again. So what message do you think that sends to our young victims? Because under the statute, if you recall, the person that's purchasing the sex is a trafficker. All right, so there doesn't always have to be a pimp. If someone is offering someone money for sex, that is trafficking, and that John, that person offering the funds, is a trafficker, but they seem to be charged less frequently than perhaps we would like to see. Due to our cultural beliefs, we find it hard to accept that many persons engaged in commercial sex work are doing so against their will. But I have yet to meet the teenage girl who woke up one morning and said, you know what I want to do when I grow up? I want to be a prostitute. I want to be a stripper. You know, and it's very easy to convince ourselves, oh gosh, they're probably making good money. This is probably what they want to do. You know, really stop and think about it. I wouldn't want that for my granddaughter, for the girls in my family. I'm sure none of us would want that for our daughters, our sisters, our relatives. No one chooses this kind of work. Most of these young women start in this trade at age 13. That's the average age of entering the trade. And in speaking with a group that does faith-based ministry to these young women that now work with adults, most of these girls say that they started when they were 13 years old and they were forced into it. So even those adults that we see out there, it wasn't a voluntary thing in the beginning, but they lose their feeling of self-worth, their feeling of value, and very much remain in the trade. Because of this, many victims are afraid to seek help from law enforcement and fear being arrested or incarcerated, as any of us would. And I'm going to run out of time before I run out of things to say. So just really briefly, most vulnerable kids are the kids that run away. The kids with developmental delays, we see them being targeted frequently. Those with some very low cognitive functioning. Foster kids are very vulnerable to this, as are the LGBTQ community. And the majority of the young men that I have seen, are young men that are that have identified as gay, and it's very, very difficult for them. So we put together a program that we call Restore Court. And what we are doing is we are working very hard in our court to try to identify young people that are either victims of human trafficking or at high risk to become victims of human trafficking. If we know that a person has not yet been trafficked, we don't want to wait for that to occur. So we look for some of these warning signs and identify those individuals that we believe are at high risk. We use specialized screening tools and we have social workers on our staff that meet with the young women and try to identify whether they will disclose to us that they are victims or that they have the signs that might indicate that they are at high risk to become victims. I can tell you a large number of the young women and men that we have identified as being at high risk, once they start to trust their service providers a little bit more, they ultimately disclose that in fact they have been victimized. So I think it's really the right thing to really reach out to these high risk children, because chances are that they're just afraid to disclose the fact that they've been victimized. Once we identify them, they go through one of two tracks. If we know that they are victims and they are charged with solicitation or prostitution or another offense that was committed because of the fact that they are victims, they are eligible for safe harbor diversion. That means if they complete all of my court orders and do what they need to do, the charges against them are dismissed. So it's easy to understand prostitution or solicitation, that would be diverted. An example of another charge that could be diverted would be, for example, I had a young woman who was charged with domestic violence. Her trafficker was in the parking lot of her apartment building. She pushed her father aside and struck him to get out of the apartment so she could go and be with her trafficker. So that was a domestic violence, but it was so closely linked to the trafficking activity that would be eligible for diversion as well. We also have a traditional track for youth that are at high risk to become victims, or youth who are victims but whose offense is not tied to the trafficking. Those individuals go on specialized probation and have numerous services packed around them to meet their specific needs. And we do referrals for trauma screenings and try to provide services that meet the needs of each child as an individual. We have a treatment team that gives suggestions as to what would be the best form of treatment. They have frequent hearings before the court. They go through phases as they advance, as they stay home for longer periods of time, have less association with their older boyfriend, as they are attending school, finding employment, doing the positive things that we would expect for them. They can move through phases toward graduation and earn rewards. There is also a sanction element if they don't do what they're supposed to do. Ultimately, they can graduate from the program, and with the majority of cases with graduation, the prosecutors are willing to dismiss the charges against them, recognizing that their behavior was really linked to a lifestyle that was unhealthy and beyond their control in many circumstances. We try to provide trauma-focused treatment. We provide mentors through Rahab Ministries that some of you may have heard of, that really just try to involve the kids in pro-social activities to pull them away from that. We provide them with positive activities, trying to replace the negative things that they were doing with good things that they could be doing. We received an innovation grant from the Supreme Court of Ohio that allowed us to open up a drop-in center for these kids so they can come in and participate in such things such as yoga, self-defense, other things, painting, whatever it is that they're interested in, to try to get them back on a normal path. We try to provide parent education to help the parents understand that their kids are victims and help them come up with some strategies to deal with their behavior at home. We are trauma focused, and I think I went through most of that. I think the important thing to take away from this is that we surround them with a number of people that are there to reinforce and provide connections to services. But it's that relationship that is so important, that positive feedback to that young woman. And sometimes, believe me, I'm reinforcing baby steps. Good for you, you went to school one day this week, you didn't go at all last week, but it's a step. And we really need to recognize every effort that these young people are making. So if you suspect someone is a victim of human trafficking, don't confront them, don't confront the trafficker. That could put the child in a situation of danger. There is a National Human Trafficking Resource Center that you can call, and there is also the Center for Missing and Exploited Children that you can call. You can make a child abuse hotline. You can call Summit County Children's Services. I'll let them know that you suspect someone is a victim of human trafficking. They will do an investigation. We work very closely with them. A child does not need to be involved with a crime to receive the services. They do to be in restore court, but they can be treated even if they are in child welfare custody. Notify your local police department is an option. And if you think the child's in immediate danger of being removed from the area, call 911. I mean, this is really serious stuff. We've had kids that have ended up in Georgia, kids that have been picked up in West Virginia. I have kids being picked up and down 71 all the time, where the judges from other counties call them. We have one of your kids here. They were found in a hotel with an older man. So, you know, it is a dangerous situation. I think it's important for us to be aware of in the community, and hopefully we can continue to do some good work. And I don't know if I used all my time or if I have a minute or two for questions.
For a couple.
Thank you, Judge. Just had a question. Is grooming a prosecutable offense?
Well, the grooming itself, probably not. Now, if the grooming reaches the stage where the individual is engaging in sexual intercourse with a child that is not old enough, I had one person who was 12, and you know, I said in the courtroom, I don't understand why, you know, why this is so difficult for everyone. At age 12, this child has been raped every time they've had intercourse with this man because they're below the age of consent, and it was like a light bulb went off in everybody's head, you know, so that they could be charged and prosecuted for rape if the child is young enough. The other thing would be is if the parent is telling the groomer, I don't want you to have any contact with my child is not allowed to be at your home, you're not allowed to have anything to do with them, then the parent could file charges for interference with custody. But the grooming itself is not, I don't think would be something that could be prosecuted. Yes?
Hi, thank you, Judge. The front lines of this endeavor, and probably in many cases the first contact, are the policemen. And I'm wondering, do they get any kind of training so that they can be as understanding and take the right steps instead of just, like you say, putting them in jail?
Yeah, you know what, and I'm glad you asked that question, because in my presentation I was really remiss in not mentioning how active the police, and in particular the federal law enforcement, the FBI, have been very active in prosecuting these cases. Many times we're unaware of a child's involvement, and the police are the ones that notify us to keep an eye open for this particular child. If we know that child has gone missing, we call them, and they really make every effort to try to track these kids down. We encourage the police, if they suspect or if they see some of these red flags, to notify us so that we can take the steps necessary to screen them and make sure that they get the services that they need. So the police departments in Summit County, not only the local police departments, the sheriff's department, but also the FBI have been very, very active and have had extensive training. Thank you for your good question. So. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor. Certainly a tragic topic, one that is necessary for all of us to know about and to be proactive in dealing with. These children are our children. They are the children of our community, our entire community. So it is up to us to step forward and be aware and try and protect them. Thank you to Jim Young, reader today, and to the audiovisual crew, Tom Page, Tom Tobin, James Field, Ron Barnhouse, and Den Rich for being ready, willing, and able to step in, you know, on a moment's notice. And Ariana Bankovich, thank you very much. We didn't scare you off, so you returned. Thank you very, very much.